These gays, they're trying to murder me.
What do I think of her?
Yes.
I don't think of her.
Goodbye. I'm off. Read about that in the New York fucking Post.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hello.
Wait, did we record a main episode last week? I don't remember.
Yeah, it was about the submersible.
The diva went down along with my
diva
IQ.
down updates. Hello.
So since the time we recorded, everybody rest in pieces at the bottom of the ocean, literally in pieces to the Titan submersible. Welcome here to Eating for Free, the podcast recording live from the absolute edge of the Atlantic Ocean shelf. We did confirm where the Titanic sank. It is in the Atlantic Ocean, not in the Pacific or in the
They're
canals
literally
of
pulling out the
Venice.
pieces right now.
They are.
And
I
we're
shouldn't
actually
laugh.
right nearby that crane that's lifting them out of the ocean.
Yeah, I am local marine explorer Joan Summers.
This is local Titanic expert Matthew Lawson.
And I have something I need to say to you today. I need to confront you in front of our guest. I also need to confront you in front of the entire podcast listening audience. You said something to me today that shocked me, confounded me. It disturbed me. It really shook me in a way that I've never been shaken in our friendship before, which is that you have tickets to see Oppenheimer on the Barbie.
I never
opening
claimed to have
weekend.
tickets to see Oppenheimer.
I think the receipts are there.
I said I will be
found them.
seated for the nuke. I will be seated for the explosion.
Oh, so
shortly after seeing Barbie.
You support the industrial war complex, is what you're
I
saying.
have nothing to say about that.
So what order are you seeing in it first? Are you seeing the nukes first or are you seeing Barbie first?
Oh, I'm seeing Barbie first, for sure.
Are you sure?
For sure.
You're not lying to me.
I'm not lying to you whatsoever.
Are
I
you
also
lying to
can't
our
do two in one
guest?
day. That'll be like 6 hours of content. That would break me down. Like, I'm not able to do that. But I will be getting probably higher for Oppenheimer because I want to be like vibrating completely throughout the entire movie.
Okay, I'm not even going to interrogate what vibrating during Oppenheimer.
I also love that you tried to call out people on Twitter for seeing Oppenheimer. And basically
did.
every mutual you have was like, we're going. Are you crazy?
Yes.
You're the one out of the loop. So
I felt like
just wanted
fighting,
to call that out.
and
Good
I
context.
successfully achieved that.
Mhm.
I felt like fighting you. I felt like fighting my friends. We have a guest today, guys. We've been kind of teasing her for a little bit. We're so excited to have her. Like, literally, I like not joking, one of my favorite drag queens, as well as just like
Absolutely.
a literal internet legend, celebrity, icon, innovator, entrepreneur, diva. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, bitches. It's BibleGirl. Thank you so much for
Yes.
having me.
Oh my God, we are so excited to have you. And since you're here, and I know you're going to take my side because divas support divas,
Here we go.
where do you stand
Yes.
on the Barbie versus Oppenheimer debate? Will you be seeing one or the other?
Barbie's going to take priority precedent before anything else. You know, she's going to supersede Oppenheimer. She'll supersede Wes Anderson. I don't give a fuck. We're here for Greta and Barbie down.
It. Exactly. See, this is what I'm saying.
That's
when
what
you have
I was
Barbie's
also
name in your
saying
mouth,
earlier.
Lawson, why would you bring up Oppenheimer
Here
too?
we go. You're the
It's
one who tweeted
duality to
Oppenheimer first.
faggotry.
Yeah.
Oh, see, there we go.
Oh, okay, wait. What is faggoty about Oppenheimer? Explain this to me. Explain this to me.
Faggots
Like,
love
was
faggots
born.
love accidents and crashes. I'm just gonna say that. That's why this submersible was very, on the list last week.
I would argue we like combos of hard and soft, right? And I think
Okay.
that
There we
goes
go.
when it's fabrication, textile, aesthetic mixing, and in this case scenario, film consumption.
Okay.
So I think
Okay.
it's a very it's a delicate binary that we're all riding here between Barbie and Oppenheimer right now.
Well, I am going to be supporting a local business, Mattel, and doing Barbie's price.
Little indie biz. Yes.
Indie biz. So Bible girl, hello.
Yes.
How's your pride
Hello.
been? We're catching each other at the end of the month. Hopefully you're
Yes.
rested.
Yeah, are you full of pride or depleted?
I'm definitely prideful for sure. Pride has been amazing. I've been in New York City visiting family for the past 2 weeks or so. I actually wound up extending what was a week and a half or so trip a little longer. And it's been really fun because it's just been, I used to live here. I lived in the city for about like 8.5 years or so. And that's where I got my drag career really started. So it's been really fun, post living in LA for the past 5 years to be here during this season, but also not feel like an outsider. Like the reacclimation factor has been so like palpable and viscerally like accessible that I've felt like I'm not really in tourist mode or vacation mode, very like assimilated to
Back
say the
to the
least.
roots.
Yeah, back to
And
the roots down.
the Bible Girl character, as well as just like your online presence, I'm sure has like completely blown up since you were in New York. Have you found that people have been like, oh my God, Bible Girl, hey, what's up, girl? Like, have you gotten any of that during your time out and about in the city?
Yeah, and I think it's actually been really interesting because the New York industry itself pre-COVID, I've been saying this a lot to people out here, just based on observational and experience, I suppose. But post-COVID, obviously everything has a collateral shift. But after being in New York pre, and then now being here post, and then LA as well, it feels like there's been like a little bit of a shift or a parallel in how the industries are operating right now, where for better, for worse, good or ugly, it's not like a negative criticism, just purely wallflower observation, you know? Out here post COVID, it seems like a lot of the fresher blood, the ingenues who I was in the comeuppance with while living out here are the ones who are running shit. So like, there's definitely a lot more of a feeling of like positive reception and like genuine wanting to like have a conversation with me without it being like a transactional kind of exchange.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, like when I first started doing drag out here, not in an absolute sense, but there was a lot of pushback where if you had an Instagram for your drag, you were like seen as less than. And so like that was something
that's so interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's
that was
definitely
something
changed now, I'm sure.
completely, and even in a global sense, right? So it's funny coming back, and all of the people who understood it from the jump are the ones who are more or less in charge now. So I felt like there wasn't really this like presumptuous stigma with me in the room, or like coming to come and support like sisters of mine from years past. And it's really cool just to see what I've definitely likened to a renaissance in New York drag in the best possible way. It just seems like the girls are doing it for themselves, and I fucking live for that shit.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I was reading actually. I have a few of your things. Like one of your very first interviews from November 2014, you were interviewed by a WordPress blog called The Queen Zine. And it's the headline I just love: Future Friday Rising Star, Bible Girl 666. And in it, you say, I see my career evolving at such a fast pace that I honestly have no idea what's next. The fact that I was invited to go play with the big girls out in Chicago before I had even been doing drag for a year is mind-blowing and humbling to me. Where do you think you have seen like what you thought back in 2014? It's been almost 10 years now. I mean, you've been doing drag for 10 years. Yeah. When you were starting out, did you see yourself going to where you are now? Is this like you've seen that natural progression, or has your journey just taken you in completely unexpected places?
I would say it's definitely, there's dual components that I think coincide with both of those points that you ask on. I would say in a greater sense, I saw there was a trajectory of success. What that looked like, I didn't know. It, you know, everything, including my own trajectory, the industry's world was moving ever fast, rapidly. And I didn't know how to pinpoint exactly what that success timeline looked like or what it was going to entail. But for me, this sounds so fake deep. In more of a retrospect sense, I can now like define what it was. I'm an intention setter, and I'm not big on like the manifesting thing. But I think
LA hasn't gotten you just yet.
No. My chakras are aligned, but I'm not a manifester. I'm an intention setter, you know? And I think by externalizing things for myself, which kind of put the pressure or the sense of personal obligation to fulfill whatever those intentions are, whether it's industry or just life in general related. That's kind of how I think my framework worked. When I was trying to really prove myself through the lens of social media, especially while hitting the bricks out here in New York, there was just flack where, it wasn't understood, but I just kind of followed through with like, fuck it. Like, I'm gonna like, what are rules, and why do these conditioned senses of norm in a not normal industry fucking matter to begin with? And that's just kind of what I followed through. And if people didn't get it, that was more on them than it was me. And definitely as like I can't believe these 10 years have really waxed more poetic. I've understood to like not wear that shit on myself. It's less of like a point of internalization. And I think that comes with my own circle of support system, and not surrounding myself with yes people or creating my own echo chambers. So like there's been space which has permitted me to receive criticism, whether valid or not, and understand how to channel it and understand what will make me feel the most fulfilled and satisfied. And I guess that's how we're here.
Yeah. And New York, is always been obviously such a mecca for queer art. But specifically with the rise of Drag Race, you know, it really became like a prominent fixture in like what people's imagination of drag was, right? Like, I mean, even coming from me, it's like you think of 2010s drag. I mean, like, I'm just thinking of like videos of Bob and Thorgy or like photos of Aquaria at Holy Mountain with Lady Fag, like those kinds of things, right? Like the big images everyone has. But when you think of New York in the 2010s, like when you were starting out, like what are you thinking of? What parties were you at? Like what is it that you were coming up in?
Yeah, what was like influential in that sense? Like, do you feel like anything really shaped the trajectory?
Yeah. First and foremost, my first ever gay bar in New York was Eastern Bloc pre-Club Coming, and it was the weekly Thursday party that Leo Gugu was hosting, and rest your soul, Jerry Visco was a fixture in that property as well on Thursday nights. And I remember walking in there. I think I had a fake at that point, and I remember going in, and I went by myself just because I had no context and nobody else who was really a part of that world yet, as I had just started going to school out here. And I was just really curious, and I was really blown away and overwhelmed, not even in a negative sense. I was just really trying to interpret this sensory overload type of an environment that was just filled to the brim with nothing but positivity. And I couldn't fathom fan clacking and just joyous, fanfare within a small confined space. And I say that very endearingly. And so for me, I think small intimate spaces definitely fostered how I've interpreted nightlife, because I think I'm a big prescriber to nightlife. Drag in general should be devoid of any sense of like pretentiousness. And I feel like spaces like those were breeding grounds that really facilitated that type of mentality and perspective. And then coinciding with that, on a parallel, while I was in school, I found myself in nightlife, going out with promoters in like Meatpacking District, just kind of straight venues, Avenue, PhD, Oak, Darby, And as I was navigating that and being enamored by the glamour or the perceived glamour of it all, there was pretentiousness that was going on with like promoters and elitism and and started getting blackballed going out with these groups where I had made all of my girlfriends, whether I went to school with them or not. But that's also where I was interpreting how people, and more specifically women in those spaces, were being treated. So then I took it upon myself to be like, well, I can do that too. So then I became a promoter at around 19 in the Meatpacking District. And that's where then I started doing drag on like Halloween, tale as old as time. Yeah. But after creating or gaining a good rapport with all like the door staff and all the gatekeepers of those types of venues, while appearing in drag and kind of making that what my niche was, while also creating and facilitating a safe space that wasn't in necessarily a queer space or for queer people, that was where I felt I thrived the most, in curating feel good times, places where people could just truly let their hair down and not feel like, you know, obviously vigilance is key, but not have to have a red alert on watching their drinks all the time, so to speak. And that's very hyperbolic, but in a nutshell, you know,
like the real community, like the local New York community that you really can rely on.
And I've read that you have said in multiple places that BibleGirl was a screen name that you used to use in middle school. And obviously, if you had screen names that you remember from middle school, I'm sure we all do. I mean, I've been using Laura Croft Barbie, I think, as long as I've been alive, which is
I'm obsessed, by the way.
I know, it's truly the goat.
Literally, I really am. It's like this easy. I saw a photo of Angelina Jolie as Laura Croft in an advertisement in a magazine in my grandma's hair salon, because she was like a hairdresser and she had like a little booth, right? And they had all the new magazines out all the time. And I just saw her and I was like, this is everything to me.
She's the one.
I want to be you. Yeah. And so anyways, Barbie and Laura Croft. But I was going to ask, like, how so many queens obviously have come up on the internet, but not a lot of queens, I think, talk about how their lives on the internet pre-drag shaped kind of how they approach drag or their careers. Like those early experiences on the internet, did they kind of shape your identity in and out of drag and like what you wanted out of it?
Absolutely. Growing up, I was definitely overprotected. I don't regret it whatsoever. My parents definitely had the right idea, based on how innocuous me getting involved in social nightlife was at 17, 18, 19. I can see how that would have been iterative when I was younger. So I really do appreciate their intentions there. So in response to that, I was definitely like a kid of the internet, whether it was on MySpace or on ethically sound boards on 4chan or 7chan at the time. And those were definitely places where I understood the concept of like how I was just talking about this earlier this week, where I understood that memes were much like how like math is viewed as like a universal type of language.
Yeah.
And it's funny I find it very funny how like an image, especially in the case where they're like just deep fried and the structure is up to hell and high water, it like elicits such a visceral response of just like laughter for whatever reason. So I've tried to really inject those types of, or that type of perspective, I guess I have, whether it was how to interpret things on the internet, whether it be memes, images, navigating dialogue or conversations, and paralleling that to IRL with drag. And I think we were just kind of discussing before we started recording that like augmented reality thing that I really try to uphold nowadays, which now, because I know what augmented reality as like a concept is, I can put like my finger to what I'm doing officially with my drag character. But for the longest time, I had been doing that, essentially like gaslighting a reality more or less with a morally sound compass. And that's just kind of where we are. But definitely like the internet as a whole has totally been a facilitator in me having, I guess, what I would consider a unique lens with how I operate in the drag world for sure.
Yeah, I can definitely see
and in real life.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see the parallel between that and obviously one of your more iconic signature phrases, how has Xannies or Coke, bro? I'm sure I butchered that, but you know, you only read it on the internet. I don't think I've ever said it out loud before, but
you'll catch yourself now more than ever.
So one thing I obviously want to get into is your pretty much like, I would say like legendary historic drag queen merch storefront, which is like obviously the first large platform of its kind to really like sell drag queen merch by drag queens through drag queens, right? Like it's, you know, we see a lot of merchandising deals in the entertainment world, but I think this is one of the few examples of a merchandising deal that is actually facilitated by someone doing it, right? Like that's one of the big criticisms people have of the Drag Race judging panel, for instance, right? Like why are non-drag queens judging drag queens? So
yes.
How did you get started? I know you said that your dad worked in merchandising. Was it really that simple of like, oh, I just kind of get how this works. This is just a natural extension of that?
Yeah, I mean, it viscerally was just kind of like that. I guess the through line that I'm thinking about in real time here is that I'm just an observer by nature and an interpreter. And my dad was never one to like really shelter off what he did for work. And as he climbed through the ranks through his job, it was really like the licensing world. So it was never limited to just t-shirts. It was really kind of any point of marketing or branding for any type of IP imaginable that you could really think of. And that fascinated me, especially when I was growing up really young in like the late 90s. That was kind of when like the Adobe suites were starting to get a little bit more accessible, or like through his job, he was definitely working on like in Photoshop. And so when I'd be down in like the media room or the basement watching him just like make presentation boards, it blew my fucking mind. And back when Pokemon came west as like obviously very popular IP on a global level, and like the Walmarts of the world were looking to have their buyers start stocking that stuff, I was the one that my dad was coming to at like 4, 5, 6, asking for like, is this the character that is supposed to hit, or what do you think about like this layout? And so then I started literally learning how to use Photoshop really, really young. And so it kind of became like, it became like this secondhand language for me that I just really picked up immediately. And I've never dropped it, even if there were windows where I wasn't actively using it. And so between that and then just like I've gone on business trips with him, I've been going into his offices with my family, just like it just kind of was this omnipresent experience. And so then when it came to being at FIT for fashion design, this is another through line again, as I'm kind of thinking about it, whether it was moving forward post school or during school. I was always being told what I was doing wasn't right, or wasn't good enough, or wasn't a fit, or I should reconsider my major, or I needed to get my shit together. Back before even like Marco had that initial runway with drag queens or performers in general on it, I was telling my professors, whether it was my associate's year or the bachelor's, in which then I left in like the first semester of that, or my classmates, my intention, whether it was something I was physically constructing or an illustration project. My croquis were all inspired by like gangly kind of Tim Burton-esque aesthetic, just very weird gaunt figures. But then I was trying to tie in more like realized runway aesthetics, but also having a bit more of that cool flair factor, you know, the Betsy Johnson type aesthetics from yesteryear, or like the Heatherettes of it all. Like that was stuff that really were super hyper influential to me. And then when I was trying to invoke that, but through my own levels of interpretation, there were just so many barriers of entry where I was just told like, this is not for you. And so it was even during that associates year where I was balancing trying to do the baby nightlife shit as a promoter and like burning the candle from every angle and just imposter syndrome flaring up every which way. And I just kept saying, fuck it. I'm going to do my thing. And then when push came to shove, because I was like 0.1 below on my GPA, where I wouldn't just get deferred into the bachelor program. I had to like reapply, got in, and I really wanted my focus for construction to be on lingerie, because I feel like that's like the most malleable of a focus. You can literally do anything with that. Look at Victoria's Secret, right? As problematic as they are, I think they're just a very visceral point here to just kind of go off of. But
and I can see that reference point in the way that you style yourself, for sure.
Yeah, thank you. The maximalist diva. But so in that first semester of the bachelor program, they wouldn't let you pick the focus that you wanted to do initially, and they would make you do like this comprehensive umbrella about all these different types of industries. So there was a knitwear like focus that was just driving me up the fucking wall. And FIT characteristically, at least during my tenure there, had just like the most archaic of hardware that we were working with. And you're just blowing money on supplies and none of the machines fucking worked. And I was sitting over a knitwear loom one day, and it was like probably my third time in this class. And it just like, we're sitting here scrubbing like we're in The Handmaid's Tale, you know? And my
classic art school
yarn,
scam, honestly.
No, it was just, it was such a fucking scam.
Just to make anything work.
It was so dumb. And I just like had a moment, and I turned to my one buddy who was like the person who believed in me in that class. And I was like, I'm going to go have a cigarette. I'll be right back. And I went up and I took 5
smokers.
I had like the squat down on the steps, muscle memory. It was such a thing.
Exactly.
And totally a college smoker for sure. That was where I was most prolific with tobacco industry down. But I remember in that like 5-minute window where I had like that, okay, what's the next move here? I had already been like kind of toying with the idea of wanting to pursue drag, but not really having that inlet quite yet. And I, in that window, like texted both my parents and I said, I don't know how you're going to take this. This is step 1. I'm done here. Step 2 is I have a plan. And the plan was, after being to enough drag shows, whether it was like, I mean, really at that point, it was just like a couple of Battle of the Seasons, because that was accessible for me at the time at like 19. I was seeing like that kind of like Warped Tour t-shirt table thing happening. But I also was understanding, as like an avid viewer and fan of the show, Drag Race itself, I was seeing the bubble really develop. And I was seeing more students even at FIT kind of have that in their like colloquial dialogues, and people were really talking about it more.
Zeitgeist in the beginning.
Exactly. The ether was really like punching at that time. And I saw a path, and the intention got set. And so kind of that's how we're here too. And I remember telling my grandma Joyce, who she passed back in October, she's my dad's mom. She was my first introduction to queer lifestyle in general. She went out to Fire Island, Cherry Grove for like the past 40 years, had like a little studio bungalow. And I remember taking like an extended weekend trip. I was living in Florida at the time with my family, and I was probably like 12 or 13 when we went up, took the ferry out, and we were just there for like a short day trip. And I remember at the time there was like a restaurant called like Burger Queen, and that blew my mind. And like seeing drag performers, A, for the first time, B, before I'd ever seen Drag Race. Like Drag Race hadn't even aired yet from season 1. And it didn't like, it wasn't like a repulsion. I was just blown away. I was so enamored and intrigued by whatever that was. And I remember going back to like the lunch table the following week in Florida and like telling my like straight nerdy guy friends about like this whole world I saw. And they couldn't wrap their minds around it.
Oh my God.
And it's just something that I guess like kind of forever stuck with me. So when I told my grandma that was also my plan, all of her drag queen friends at that time, drag is basically essentially freelance. So she was definitely pragmatic but cynical at the same time. So when I told her what my approach or my hypothetical game plan was, she was like, cool, but how are you going to do this so you're not surfing on couches for the rest of your life? And I said, well, it's funny that you say that. And then I just like kind of laid out this like licensing merchandising pitch. And that's just kind of what held.
Yeah. As podcasters, notably the most lucrative business in entertainment, man, I know nothing about the couch surfing lifestyle.
Correct.
I will say I was being a little shady while you were talking. I was actually, before I made this joke, looking if you merchandise any of her shirts, and you don't. So I can. It's very interesting that out of the Drag Race fashion school world, some of you went to make soft sculptures and get voted first out on All Stars, and some of you went on to start very lucrative t-shirt businesses, it looks like. So shout out Serena Chacha and
Cha-Charina wig, hit it up.
If they ever arrive. I want to say also, it's really interesting. I hadn't actually thought of this until you mentioned it, but I think it's a really common thing. I think Matt will agree with me, for queer people, especially queer people who are like finding themselves the only person in the room or the first to do something, that like you're coming into something like a fashion school and the way they're doing things, you're like, this is so outdated, or like, this is not at all what I think.
Every single friend we have who's ever gone to art school or tried to make it in those spaces.
I remember being in film school. I went to school for film, and I remember like explaining what I wanted to do. I was like, I want to make like a reality show, but it's like a fake reality show where we're like recreating scenes from our lives, but it's like us playing ourselves on the reality show. I can
see the professor already rolling her eyes.
And my professor was like, what the fuck are you talking? This is fake, right? Like, I need you to make a cop movie, or like, I need you to make like a noir film.
Then meanwhile, our parents are like, get the A's and get out of school.
This isn't a real job.
Get this shit wrapped up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And don't make our choices wrong for putting it through here. Yeah.
But then, once that I actually did make that thing. It was like a short film, and immediately, I got recognized on the internet. Like, I had like a profile in Out magazine when I was like 18, which is not a brag.
Dope.
I mean, it was literally nothing burger, but
it's a brag. Flex on that shit.
Yeah.
But that's the tapestry.
All those people from school that were like, wait a minute, how did you get that? Wait, how did that happen for you? Right? Do you ever find that other people in the industry that you have seen be like naysayers, or like just people that maybe didn't understand your vision have come around, or you've had any stories where you're like, wait a minute, you weren't always this supporter of me?
Yes, definitely in many different avenues it's been that way, whether it's been people who I know that they've just outwardly talked mad shit for whatever fucking reason about me, whether it was behind my back, locally in the scene, online, who then have wound up applying to be on the website, and I just play dumb about it because whatever. Like, at the end of the day, like,
really say,
right. Like, okay, so like, we're already out of high school. Like, I don't need to deal with like petty dynamic. Like, I've been self-assured in my own self. So like, I'm not going to get hung up on someone who's like looking to like also be supported and like get on, like establish themselves and be successful, or at least try to foster a platform. And like, I feel like it is a weird thing to straddle, where it's like, you kind of have to kill your ego a little bit and find that sweet spot. And then outside of that, I can give you actually a very specific example.
Please. Oh my God, we would love Eating for Free exclusive.
It's very good. I'm pretty sure she said it on the record with me on her own podcast back in the day. But Katya, we toured the first time we ever met, and her and I are cool. I love her. We toured. The first time I met her / the first time we ever worked together, we were touring in Brazil in 2015.
Oh my God,
come to Brazil.
And yes, it was that. That is probably the coolest thing I've ever done in my entire career, for sure. But I remember she came in on like, I think it was like either the second or the third city, and we all, whoever else I was with, we were waiting for like the bus or whatever was picking us up to get to the hotel that we were staying at in that city. And I remember, obviously, like, you get off a plane, you kind of don't really want to deal with anybody. And I remember, like, while we were waiting for whatever vessel we were waiting, she lit her cigarette up, didn't really want to get talked to. And I get that. I can be that girl too. Yeah. I understand. You're in a different place that you're not familiar with. Got to take the edge off. She's fresh off the show. Actually, I think, she was just fresh off the show. Now that I'm thinking about it. Yeah, it's 2015. Yeah. And so fast forward to when we're recording that, and her and I got along either way on that tour and on that night of the show too. But I remember her bringing it up on that podcast, being like, her coming into that space, she was like, I thought I was gonna fucking hate you. And then that like totally fleshed out exactly why I could see or sense like there was some irkiness going on.
Yeah.
But like that tends to be what happens though, is like I understand that like my like social media output can be a very, very acquired taste, for lack of a better
Yeah.
term. And it's, if you're not really inclinated to understanding exactly what I'm saying in that moment or what it's tying back to, because I'm not really going out of my way to like explain
And
it
the
all the
layers of a
time.
deep fried meme, you have to know.
Right.
To know.
It's a nesting doll in and of itself. And so like
Yeah.
if someone's really interested enough, there's definitely, like we said, a large enough digital footprint where you can go and find it out. If you're really inclinated to learning, it's there. And she definitely took it upon herself to figure it out. And I remember when we were recording that podcast, she was like, girl, I get it. I got it. It all made sense after we were like hanging out. And I think that goes back to the ARG thing, is that, you know, we put up this level of artifice. Drag is a costume or a fantasy.
Yeah.
And that was always a very interesting learning curve for my own character and my own intention through that character, that I was always trying to find, is like, I can be kooky on the internet and I can be kooky IRL, but like people were like expecting me to be like an absolute monster or train wreck in person, when it's like, if you actually like gave me space to like understand my humanity and where I come from, you would be pleasantly surprised. And that tends to be what the case is after making a first IRL impression of someone. Their mind gets completely fucking rocked for the littlest things. Like, it's just me, you know, like it's what it is.
Matt, Matt and I have both separately met people who listen to this podcast, and it's always weird when someone has a
familiar feeling.
Yeah, that super like distinct idea of you, because the only you that they know is a you that you have like constructed and curated and then like performed for them. And they meet you, and I'm like, I'm just some lady. Like in real life, I am just some lady. Like
just a sweet girl. Down.
Do you think that there has been in your career, you've noticed like a difference between queens in the way that they interact with you, where they're like queens on the internet who are like more predisposed to get it, to like more of like an older generation of queens that didn't use like the internet to really build a platform, right? Like they came up just solely through performing in the clubs or the pageant system, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Definitely like back when I was first starting, I remember like if I was guesting, doing my little freelance gig, someone, when it was my turn to get called up on the mic, it would be like an intro or something where it was like, you might not know her, but she has more Instagram followers than everyone in this room combined. And it's like, so like, okay, you're like,
don't do that,
this,
actually.
Like, what is this setup? Like, why are we doing it like this? It doesn't have to be this way at all. And so like, yeah, it was just always so mortifying like that. It's like, okay, so you're like making it a thing when like, I'm boots on the ground here. So like, what's the big fucking deal? Right.
Yeah,
and like
you're introducing me on the mic. Like you have all the power in this situation.
Right. Like you booked me. So why are we doing this? Why does it have to be this way? And so I think there were angles like that definitely bared repeating a lot. Or even when it came to something like, maybe it was this way. My interpretation of it is like there was just like so many heightened levels of just being a contrarian and like trying to push back the notion of, I know Rue loves to like swear drag will never be mainstream, but obviously we're way past that fucking point.
I mean,
and like I remember DragCon year 1 actually, which in LA, I was still living out here. And once it like was knowledge or common knowledge that I was going out that way, and it was before TQM actually existed. It was just BibleGirl666.com. And I had done just like a small round of like 6 different designs that I thought would last enough for the 2-day weekend that I was doing that point. And I remember like people, whether it was like vague booking about me or just anyone else that was outwardly saying like, I'm going to be doing DragCon or going to DragCon, you'd be like, oh, you're going to do the mall for drag? It's just a mall. Like, you're selling out. It's like,
what the hell?
So it was really like such a bizarre time, like when that stuff was still getting established. And like, yes, it's corporate. Sure, there's a level of sellout, but like, okay, you go to Dwayne Reed and CVS, like what the fuck is the difference? like it was just like such a weird, like it's such a strange whataboutism to try and make yourself seem like you're better. And it was like, that was never what this was about in the first place. Like I'm trying to get me and mines, and like that should be sufficient enough for you as a fellow queer entertainer. And like that was in my infancy as a queer entertainer. And so again, that's just yet another like point of the through line that seems to have followed. And maybe that's part of the queer experience. I don't know.
Yeah.
And like
You
Yeah,
first,
I was
Matt.
gonna say, and with that, like, I know that's probably a series of different events that have led up to it, but do you feel like there was a moment when you started after doing DragCon and kind of bringing your merch into those big public spaces? Do you feel like there was a moment where it really started to like take off into what it kind of is today?
Yeah, I mean, DragCon year one, it actually
That was it.
that was the green light, I think, actually, because as I said, I had thought that I had produced enough merchandise as someone who, like, at the time, I mean, it was a lot at the time, but it was like 7,000, 8,000 followers on Instagram, which again was offensive to people locally here for whatever fucking reason. but so actually, it was a really interesting way that it worked out, because where I was placed on the map, just by sheer coincidence, was in a corner of that convention room, that convention hall, and as that was also right after season 7 had ended, that was like peak duality of Trixie Katya. So they had a booth that they were shared joint, and because of how crazy the line was, it was wrapping around X far around the convention hall. So that corner that I was in wound up becoming like an observation deck for people to watch me interact with people that were coming to me. And it started to build the, I guess, palace intrigue and interest, and people seeing that because there were the social media perceptions of me even in the beginning of it all. People got it. Even viscerally at that point, to the point where I sold out of everything on day one. So day two was basically creating that safe space yet again, where like when kids were having the sensory overload anxiety thing, I was always just like, just come and pooch here if you want. Like, it's fine. We can fucking vibe out. There's balloons. It's chill. and that just kind of, and since then, like literally every year, I mean, I have repeat offenders that come and visit all the time, like kids who were just like young queer teenagers who were coming with their parents, who their parents were still just trying to figure it all out, but in earnest were supporting their kid. The amount of conversations I've had with parents one-on-one while their kid was just like looking at merch without pressure of buying anything, but like leveling with people and like disarming any kind of stigma or negative perception that might have been lingering. And then since then, I mean, there's one particular family where I met their child, their oldest child, who has since, transitioned, and it's just like, it's one of those beautiful things that like, so that's the thing that is always frustrating now, especially looking back, where people were so quick to be like, you're selling out. It's like, there's so much more to it than this. Yeah. There's so much more. And so DQM, of course, in tandem with that, yes, is a business, but because of that vessel, that fulcrum, which has provided a platform for myself, it's allowed me to share experiences and share experiences with and meet people that I otherwise would not have been privy to. And I've gained so much perspective, and I've grown so much from like all of that combined. So like that first year really was just indicator that it's all systems are go. And the only real uphill battle that I think we've faced was onboarding clients in the beginning, because it was like such a new concept, I guess. And I'm an offender myself. Reading percentages and numbers and breakdowns can be very daunting. So when trying to like prove to someone like this is like a legit thing, that was definitely like our first battle. Which of course, like after like about, I think we had like 10 clients. I think within that like first 10 or 15 is when we had onboarded Trixie. So once we had like gotten Trixie on board, I think that was definitely a good like fulcrum that yielded a lot more onboarding results.
Not once, but twice in this story, Trixie has participated in trickle-down economics to all the
yes, absolutely.
Oh my God.
I want to use this as a nice segue, because, as I think battle-hardened and at times very pessimistic communists, Matt and I, it can be hard not to, during Pride season, fall into that like aggressive, like, ugh. This is like my least
especially
favorite month
as the
of the whole
discourse
year.
has like seeped into every aspect of it.
Yes.
And, I think with things like drag queen merch, like, I really do think this year more than ever, with the stuff going on in states like Tennessee and Florida, and even in California and New York City, about drag queens and trans entertainers and just trans people and drag queens at large. Like, I think something I've been really thinking about is like something like a t-shirt, and looking at the Target Pride collection specifically, is so important to people who are not in a place like, where Matt and I are. Well, Matt is in, San Francisco, or I'm in Philadelphia. You're in New York right now. Like these places where it's just so normal to us. Like you don't necessarily think like, I need this t-shirt to like express myself, right? I need this like et cetera to express myself. There are places where that is like really powerful for people. And so this Target Pride collection, you know, this is obviously, I think, your first mainstream collection in like a big box store, correct?
I in a store that big, yes. In the past,
yeah.
we've done retail deals with Hot Topic and Spencer's in the past as well. But Target was like the white whale of it all. You know what I mean?
Right.
How did that turn come about for you? Was that something that you pursued, or did Target come to you first?
So I will definitely give credit where it's due through my dad, who for years he had been trying to, for any licensing deal, get a contact through Target. And, you know, we had been waxing poetic for the past couple of years on what our next retail deal was going to be, because it had been a couple of years, and those previous retail deals were definitely more in like a capsule type of sense, where it was like couple of physical spaces would be there. Definitely online presence was where it was at, but the integration in terms of promoting it was a little lacking, and that's just like definitely an objective observation. I don't think it was for anything in particular. I just think that's just how, when you do a collab with a space like that, you know, the buyers buy what they're going to buy. It goes on the floor, and that's just kind of it. So we were trying to find method and a space that it would make the most sense to try and pursue. And so when my dad, David, had come into that Target contact, we looked at that as like, okay, here's some serendipity. Let's make some timing work here. And we pitched to the buyer that he got this contact for, who's their, like, I think it's called like their special category division buyer or something like that. So like that's for anything, whether it's like Black History Month, AAPI month, any kind of like actual category that's specific to just different cultures in general. They were the ones who were in charge of what those kind of conversations and what those products coming in for their stores or online retail were going to look like. So once we were able to bridge the gap of communication and got a sense of positive interest, we basically had about a 2-week turnaround to cultivate like a hypothetical pitch board of people, of performers, whether or not we had already represented them on the site or not, because we still communicate with other merchandiser websites in the drag industry, other managers who kind of do it independently with their clients in general. And we just wanted to try and make it something that wasn't so specifically self-serving to our website alone, but also, to your point, something that was important in terms of representation. And that, I mean, that in like any facet, to the point of it not being whitewashed, people who are represented throughout the entire I mean, it was mainly Drag Race franchising for sure, because that's like that's what sells, unfortunately. That's just the name of the game. So unfortunately, you do have to plug into that matrix a little bit. So with the names that we had initially listed in our pitch, they were kind of volleying back on other names without pushing back against ours. And so we were kind of figuring out who was going to be the most accessible, who made the most sense in terms of correspondence, getting things signed, brokering those deals, commissioning the art, and getting things approved. And so basically in that like very, very quick 2-week turnaround, we were able to lock in the names that we did and put an entire deck together, got everything approved. And we had like a final pitch meeting with that buyer division. And they were all, if not mostly, comprised of queer people on that team. So it was very like homegrown. It felt super like not corporatized as corporate of a deal as it was. Like everyone was definitely engaged with it, to the point like when my partner and I were building it, we were super keen on sharing our Kennedy Davenport just pitch page in general. The art, even the art that didn't get approved, I'm like so proud of. And when we got to her page without them even knowing what we were going to show them, it was like a collective across the 6 of them, just like, like they were all just so hype on it. And that was what honestly resonated with me, feeling like this was the right direction. Everything made so much sense. And as they were into what we were pitching to them, down to like, okay, so I had a nugget of understanding that Lux Noir London was more likely than not going to wind up on season 15. And when we were building that pitch, before I had an official inclination, I've been a diehard stan of hers forever. And so like, we're forecasters. We understand this shit, right? So like,
trendsetters.
Literally trend forecasting.
Like literally down to the trend forecasting. For sure. And so I felt it in my bones. And so I made sure she was a part of this pitch, and I made this design, and they were really, really, really on the fence for a while. I was like, just trust me on this. We'll see, we'll see, we'll see. And then finally, when push came to shove, it was like, I think months later, after she had been kind of on hold and things had more or less been finalized and tags for everyone else had been printed, the cast announcement came out. I sent the email over to the team again. I was like, see, I told you. And then they were like, all right, let's do it. Let's make it fucking happen. And so like, that was stuff that I was just so happy to really bring people, again, whether they were performers, big, clout heavy, doesn't matter, into a space like that. Because again, to your point, Joni, like, someone walking into a space like a Target, brick and mortar, whether they have the financial means to purchase the product or not, but to see it on the shelf is such a powerful notion. And like, it sounds relatively comedic with a punchline, kind of, but not really. Like for me, I juxtapose it to like my experience of like walking into a Hot Topic and seeing a Super Mario shirt or a Kirby shirt. Like, and I know it's not identity representation, but it's like, just things that like are important to us at our core or that have shaped us, and to see those things that you thought were so specific to you, but on a wall for the greater public to kind of just be forced privy to is really important to kind of affirm where you feel in your own sense of self and identity. So that, coupled with then the backlash that happened a year later after working on everything, was definitely jarring and interesting. And I'll leave that there with my motor mouth, and I'll let you continue to guide the conversation. I'm sorry.
I think
it's all very interesting, honestly.
I believe we watched, it was All Stars 3 that Kennedy was on. And, you know, Kennedy has that now infamous scene of, you know, talking about like at the meet and greets going off of Drag Race and feeling like the lines weren't as long for her, just to see where she is now in her career, and to know that she was like, you know, selected for this. Like, it does make me a little emotional, just because like, what an icon and innovator, one of those drag queens that has shaped drag in the like public imagination so much since being on the show. So that's just like really cool. Like, I just wanted to say that was so cool that she was like a part of that collection. And
thank you so much.
We would be remiss not to talk about the controversy. Obviously.
Bring it on. Bring it the fuck on. I don't care. So I do want to ask, so obviously I'm going to just like quickly, for our listeners who might not know what is being talked about right now, NPR, AP, and a bunch of other websites reported in May and then again in June that Target had said in a statement posted on its website that it was committed to celebrating the LGBTQIA community, but was withdrawing some items physically in store, not necessarily from their website, that were the source of threats that were, quote, impacting our team members, is what they said directly. And that they said the team members felt unsafe because of threats that were being either phoned into the store or handed them directly in store. And this tied into wider controversy, obviously, across the country, which we've covered extensively on this podcast, about, you know, anti-drag laws, the so-and-so drag ban bills in places like Florida and in Tennessee. And at the center of this was a lot of shirts that you had made for Target. And where did you first hear about this? Did you hear about this from Target, or did you see the controversy first online? It was definitely via like an AP Reuters headline that I learned that this was going down. I and I remember actually it was so casual that I happened upon it too. I was just like scrolling on Twitter, and my partner was working from home that day. And I think he was like in the middle of a meeting with his own office. And I like popped my head and I was like, have you seen this? And then I reached out to David and I was like, we might need to like assess what's going on here. Cause we had no direct correspondence about it. B, we just weren't obviously in tandem with that. We weren't sure where anything was going to fall with what we had worked on in response to that backlash. And
so wait, you had heard first from the news, not from anyone at Target, right?
We to this day never actually really heard from them directly.
Are you fucking serious?
Yeah. So detail is just
I really don't mean to push this button, but
no. You can. Yo, I'm like,
that's crazy to me.
Yeah. It was really interesting and like.
Up.
Yeah, and it's again, it's this weird place to be in because I don't directly hold this against the buyer division that we worked with because they're certainly not the ones that made this call.
They're not. No.
And that was something where again it comes back to like that ego death thing where it's like this is something that goes beyond any point of control that I have. So yes, of course I was pissed off about it. Yes, I was frustrated because we all should be mad about trying to be silenced and have this like hyperbolic locker shove happening to us in whatever manifestation it feels like. And I just like what was really strange is how the information what should have been direct to us was more in like this drip feed sense that we were learning through like customer experiences versus like headlines too. Whereas like people, you know, the top one I can think off the top of my head, someone like 3 weeks ago tried to buy, I guess, a Shea Coulee shirt that was like left on the floor. And then they tried to check out, and it's like when you try to do like self-checkout with alcohol, like a clerk comes over, and I guess that clerk came over and then had to like pinpoint what the reason was that it was getting flagged. And then I guess like the finite conclusion was, well, we can't sell this to you. And then even outside of like, it was so bizarre. And like, even outside of like our specific merchandise, I had a friend who was visiting down in Florida and was like gonna go get like a bathing suit. To quote him, he was like, I'm looking for a good old like 6-inch inseam basically with a rainbow short at Target. And they wouldn't let him check out with it. So it's like, I know enough from like first party also that it wasn't just like sensationalized hearsay happening on the internet. Like, and it was happening to so many people that were unrelated to one another that it was like too much to not be, it's not a coincidence. Like we know exactly what's happening there. Right. And, what was weird also is that, our merchandise was then still online, and what made it even stranger, or I guess what still is a bit of a strange ambiguity, that I'm like waiting to see how the shoes fall come August. When is their payout deal with us and all of our clients?
That was my next question.
Yes. So the way that it was set is that it's, you know, I think the royalties were based on sale volume. And so when these clients that we onboarded for this collection, we said, you know, if the purchase order is this, if they all sell out, you'll make this. So we know for a fact that because the queer team came to my booth at DragCon this past year, which was a week into the launch and a week before the backlash, they came to me and they were telling us how all of these products, this category itself, sold quicker, faster, and at a veracity that they've never seen before in any other division that they've launched. And I coupled that with them being like, it's amazing. Like, we have had zero backlash, and like in our industry, it's a fickle one. You're pretty quick to get criticism, even if it's within our own community. And there just was none of that. And so we were just so excited and proud of that, to the point where it all sold so well that a second purchase order got made for certain clients, if not all of them. And so now the interesting ambiguity that's the big question mark for me still is, are we going to now have to incur the product that's been secondarily printed? Are these clients now not going to be making the money that was essentially promised to them because of a plug that got pulled against our own will? And then does that mean that us as a company are going to be put in debt for production of merchandise that was meant to sell? And if they're going to just like put it on us, it's all hypothetical, but we have no direct correspondence. So it's just kind of like this waiting thing.
Was there like any promised communications, like any regular updates they were going to give, and it just went radio silent? Or is it just uncharted at this point, I guess?
I think uncharted's a really good way to put it. I can tell you the last direct piece of correspondence that I had was, so there was another designer that was a part of just like their Pride collection in general, who they commissioned, who I guess like did like more irreverent, hokey pokey, like Satan respects pronouns design, stuff like that, which I think is fine. Like it's whatever. But because of, I talked about this on Very Delta, my username being conflated to my drag name, that then got put in my product title as BibleGirl 666. So then all of these zealots, these conservative zealots who were freaking out over t-shirts.
These are the people that come in and are like on TikTok because they're like having a fit in the store about.
Yes. So they, because of the product title of mine, they then lumped my product to be a part of that other artist who was in question. So like, it was like the lack of media literacy, blows my fucking mind for people who think that they know what they're fighting for when it's very clear they don't. But so anyway, this last point of correspondence I had was like, look, if it's a Hail Mary to save our collection and like my specific design or my specific shirt is creating like there that isn't there in the first place, then like let me just follow my pride, no pun intended, and just delist my shirt, like remove it, fine, like fuck it, whatever. I don't like, I can eat that, whatever. And so my shirt did get removed, but I think there are certain listings on the website for our collection where they haven't removed them or delisted them, but they've just kind of marked it so it's like all sold out. Like there's no sizes being replenished anymore. It's like, again, it's so much ambiguity and lack of clarity that there's a level of me disengaged from it while still also relatively engaged, because it's just so much and so much lacking of information.
Because someone does know, someone in corporate knows what they're doing here. This aren't made.
Yes, I mean, if they were able to actually pull down my shirt, that means someone's listening and watching and paying attention. But like, I don't know. It also stunts morale for what was high for high sale volume initially. And now who the fuck wants to support Target as a queer person to buy their Pride merchandise that's left on the site, let alone what's not allowed to even be purchased off the floor? Like you kind of just fucked us in general. So it's a very bizarre space.
And it's interesting because I think something that gets tossed around a lot is like, queer people, like, show what you feel through your wallet, right? Like, don't buy Target if Target's going to do this, right? Like, when the Dodgers stadium, like, basically spat in the face of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, like, people are like, let's not go to the Dodgers games, right? Like, show what you want. But in, like, a situation like this, where Target, like, actively collaborated with queer people and then pulled that product over controversy. And then in like some cases like Bud Light, has kind of like wiffle waffled in the face of controversy. Completely. Or the Dodgers have like wiffle waffled. I think we're like entering uncharted territory where it's like, well, wait a minute. Like the Dodgers invited the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. And then they were like, actually, never mind.
Right. As if it wasn't a precedented invite already.
Yeah, exactly. And then when people were equally as angry about it, they were like, well, actually, we'll have them back, but in this capacity. And also, like, we're trying to cater to everybody. I think this is like a very new thing for all of us. And it's interesting that like we are seeing brands more than ever realize the viability of like queer people as like a product, right? Which has a lot of things to say about it in general. I think we have said most of them on this podcast, but like, what do you think when brands are going forward? Like, it's inevitable that another brand is going to make another Pride collection with another person, et cetera, et cetera. Like, we're always going to have the Pride merch for like, I don't know, what is it? The iconic one in San Francisco, the Whopper Jr., the Pride Whopper is like famous fixture in like the San Francisco scene.
The bottom buns.
Yeah. Like going forward, when these collections start to happen again next year or throughout the year, when people want to, host drag queens or they want to make, the drag queen a face of something or collaborate with a brand like Drag Queen merch, like what can they do to make this like worth it for the people involved, right? Because like there's so much uncertainty now, I think, that like you can't even really expect it to go well.
Yeah, like would you ever trust an organization at that scale again?
I would, but in the case that like I was communicating exactly what the needs as a queer business owner that I require are and what needs to be fulfilled, and whether that's making that into a contract, having it in writing, because this was such an uncharted situation. And, whether of course, it's due to the culture war of it all. Like we've been in retail before and it was never a big fucking deal. You know what I mean? So I think in cases like this, where it is that uncharted territory, I think us as queer people, whether you're a business owner, an individual entity, it's about knowing our worth. And like, it's hard, it's easier said than done, of course, but realizing that it's like, we're the commodity here. Like we have the leverage here. So in the case that like contracts are being built out, I'm not expecting a greater percentage because of what our category is, because licensing deals across the board are percentages in an absolute form. But what I'm thinking in this case, and I've definitely waxed a bit poetically on this internally, it's like, there has to be some kind of like a force majeure clause where like, if something like this goes down, and I'm going to use this specific instance, it's like, in the case that there's leftover product and y'all have basically blackballed the sales of it, then I would hope that you send us what is left of the product so it doesn't get wasted or incinerated, and then B, pay out as if it all sold out and cover exactly what everybody signed up for, because they can eat that. And it's actually, I can't speak quite yet, but it's yet to be seen if that's how they want to operate or not, and actually like be responsible and accountable for a decision that they made. And so I think moving forward, it really is going to have to come down to communication and making sure that things kind of pertaining to this stuff is in writing, and just like protection clauses in general. Like there has to be language that means that we're not deferred as like accountable or liable for losses incurred.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense. And it's scary too. I mean, just like the fact that this is happening with such a frequency, like when it was like, I hate to say it like this, but confined to places, like it felt confined to certain places in this country where it was like, oh, there's still like a somewhat sense of normalcy at like the New York bars. But I've even had friends who are in New York who are like, the vibes were different this year. Like across the board, this whole month has just had like a shadow over it for everybody.
Apprehension.
Yeah. It wouldn't be a Bible Girl interview if we didn't talk about the patron saint of Bible Girl, Britney Spears.
Yeah.
I was going to say, let's segue into lighter topics, but this is not light. Okay. First off, what got you into Free Britney? Like, you were obviously a Britney fan. You talked about this like extensively, but like, what got you into the movement at large?
So ever since she was in the conservatorship, I, as like the inclinated diehard fan and the community that I kind of shared online with the same echelon of the stan base, we always knew that it was wrong. Something was wrong in that. Less with her, and not really anything with her at this point, to be honest. And it was more about what was constructed around her and this weird firewall that began to surround her, and her personality shift, and just her level of inaccessibility when she is the biggest pop star ever, the most photographed person ever on the planet, and yet all of a sudden she became diminished, and it was clearly not at her own accord, and whether that was seen in what project outputs were or interviews where she was very palpably not engaged because she was just over it. And then people who weren't inclinated to what was going on just passed it off as, oh, she's just a weirdo, which, we're all weirdos. And like, that's why I really appreciate her. But it's because they were coming at it from like such a weird ableist standpoint. That was something that like just kind of further affirmed that there was something going on. And actually, the first inclination was, if you saw For the Record back in 2008, her team has basically scrubbed any point of access to watching that, because
Isn't that was weird. I must have
really
seen
freaky.
it like 10 times. Like that was like one of my
I'll tell you
favorite
exactly
specials.
fucking why. I have 2 DVDs of it. I have 2 physical versions just for preservation's sake alone. But it's within the first year of that conservatorship being constructed, but it's them doing everything that we've all come to find out now 15 years later on camera, telling her what she couldn't and could do, her being just surrounded by people. She couldn't go anywhere. There's a scene where it's like towards the end of the credits where they like dangle her car that she is allowed to drive for the camera for however long it is in the credits scene as like a big surprise because she was just such a good girl. And it's like that, it was always done in the open. And even like the woman who allegedly, Lou Taylor, who helped construct it, there's so much on record stuff between judges who have been on like panels because they're absolute egomaniacal narcissists, basically bragging about the system that they were abusing.
Right.
It's such, and the biggest part about this, which the hardest concept, basically all of that stuff, there was so much there, which made me innately want to be a part of it. And I felt that I was just like a part of my blood, that I was within the movement from the jump to begin with, before we had a united division or front for it. And then it's just like, because of how much of a fucking rabbit hole it is, but a rabbit hole that's rooted in fact and paper trail, it was
Literal
really
court
hard.
Records.
And much like I said, drag queens performers hate reading percentage breakdowns when it comes to onboarding for merchandising. People are not going to read fucking court records when they're public.
No.
And just trying to inclinate people to the fact, as crazy as it all sounded, made us sound crazy. So that was always this crazy uphill battle. There was actually, I think it was the first rally I ever did. It was outside. It was the first one held after there was like that leaked voicemail from a while ago in like 2019. And I remember we were all outside the Stanley Moss courthouse. And this guy who was definitely some kind of like a paralegal that worked in that world coming out, had nothing to do with Britney Gate or anything happening there. Came out and it was just like old white guy, typical, fit the bill for exactly someone who was going to push back against what our cause was. And I remember him like coming up to me and the two other people that I was with and just being like, well, how do you even know this is even happening? Blah, 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 blah. And we were like, well, ABC. And I was like, it's down to the point where like she isn't even allowed to like legally vote. And he was like, well, you don't know that. I was like, actually, I do. It's this system. And it was just like, you literally work in the corrupt system and you're actively gaslighting us when you're not even a part of this case. And then when I like challenged him, of course, when it was something that I knew that he had zero context or understanding of, it was just like oh, well, you know, it's like when you get someone's goat and like, you know, you won. I was like, all right, like,
because they
moving.
don't respect her or care about her. That's like where it all
and
boils down to.
It's so rooted in just like that misogyny component. And there's just deeply rooted ableism and like so much of that, the general populace, as consumers of all of this that was going on, really, whether they understood that it was something that they needed to do or they still haven't, it comes having to kill those notions in our brains to really appreciate exactly the severity of what was going on. The fact that, again, the most famous photographed human on the planet was being trafficked for 15 years, like to verbalize it like that still just like sends a shiver down my spine because it makes me so sick. In our faces.
Yeah.
It was in our fucking faces.
Now, we've talked a lot about the specifics of the case, so I won't like make you rehash the details, but the one thing that keeps standing out to me, and you've posted about this extensively on Twitter, so I know you are the definitive source for this information. One thing that I had never wrapped my brain around, even when we did our 2 investigations on Britney, like our pre-conservatorship and post-conservatorship.
God bless y'all.
I mean, I've been writing about Britney like as long as I've been a journalist because again, like this conservatorship has like fascinated me for years and years. One thing I never really wrapped my brain around until I saw your tweets about it consistently over the last few years is that Lou Taylor like still represents people. Like TriStar Entertainment is like still actively representing
a lot
of celebrities just off of Wikipedia, which by the way, I'm not saying that this is like the definitive list of TriStar entertainers or the definitive list of Lou Taylor's clients, but like big names: Steven Tyler, Mary J. Blige, Gwen Stefani, Priyanka Chopra, Meghan Trainor, just to like name a few. In the past, we've also had like Reba and Jason Derulo. So like these are like Lou Taylor specific clients.
The Kardashians, the Jenners.
Yes, exactly.
The Hollywood institution.
And what I never realized that like other people in Lou Taylor's orbit like have actively been hanging out with her and posting, like, I think Kim just sent like a thank you note to her recently that she posted about. Meghan Trainor was on the podcast with Trisha Paytas, and they were like kikiing over Britney and like the conservatorship and like making cracks at it. Like all the while she
got
Lou Taylor's.
triggered.
Yes. Like
it's true.
So like in all of this, like what has do you know anything about like what Lou Taylor has said about this since like she's still just actively working, right? Like TriStar is still like a quote unquote legitimate company still, right? That actively represents celebrities.
Yes. So she's still at the top of TriStar and she still represents a lot of like these big A-listers. And I think we're seeing definitely what I would interpret as like she has access to power, and through that power and finance access is a built-in and baked-in defense. And I think, you know, it's just like a gross good old boys club. Like Irving Azoff is allegedly implicated in a lot of this as well. And he represents people like not to like do a combating women against women thing, but like Christina Aguilera is one of his big clients. And like he was someone who was definitely an institution with like Lou Taylor involved with like this kind of crazy fucking rabbit hole. And I think like what actually really inclinated that there was more there too was through a lot of these celebrities' inaction or lack of discussing it, as it was such like a public topic as it was gaining more and more traction. And I think
Yeah.
like Kim Kardashian is like honestly a really good example too, because she's doing all of her paralegal work, and I think the work that she has done in certain aspects has been good. But it just seems weird how someone who has propositioned how she's such a big fan and cares so much and blah 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 blah, and to the point where at like an Elton John Grammy dinner, I think like she's asking for photos with Britney like a couple of years ago in like 2011, 2012. It's like, you knew what this web has been. You were at the VMAs in 2016 announcing her to do Make Me, and we're taking selfies with her in the dressing room, and yet you're actively, allegedly inclinated to exactly what's going on here, while also allegedly there's a little bit of a financial component where there's been profiteering off of the back of Britney Spears, that trickle down economics. Here we are again, vis-a-vis Lou Taylor getting the work for the Kardashians. It's like, it's all been really founded upon, like if you look at the paper timeline of it all, it always comes back from like the weaponization of workhorsing Britney, and like all of the clout and all the opportunity that that is brought upon by the invoking alone of Britney's name has kind of been ridden upon by that family alone, in my opinion.
It's hard not to feel like it's all Illuminati connections at this point. Like, it's hard not to feel like it spirals into something greater than we can ever understand.
And I think that's where like that good old boys component comes to, because it's easy to pass it off as something cheeky as the Illuminati, as we all remember the Beyonce's and the Illuminati. Days. Like,
you mean Anne-Marie Lastrossi?
The Illuminati. See, like we all, and that was so fun, and like that was irreverent and like cheeky. But what we're looking at through this is a quite literal parallel of what people thought was the Illuminati. It's just a different name and a different abusive system, and it's just very, very bizarre.
One thing that stands out to me about Kim, which I'm sure you remember this because it caused quite a stir, was when she posted the note after seeing the Free Britney documentary. She said something like, I just watched Free Britney documentary, the New York Times produced one on Hulu. Yes. And she was like, my heart goes out to her. And then she went into this story about, at times in my career, I've like been made fun of in the press, and like, they've like taken photos of me. And it was interesting because she's still Lou Taylor's client. And also none of it was about the like abuse or the like forced medicine taking or the forced hospitalizations or, really the fact that Britney was like in captivity, being worked against her will, right? Like all these illegal activities. The thing she took away from it was, people have also taken pictures of me when I didn't want to and made fun of me.
People were mean to me too. Okay.
And it makes me interested in also like the Kanye West of it all. Obviously we all don't need to sit here and defend Kanye West or what Kanye West is up to. But we can all say that like Britney Spears to her greater family, Kanye like fed the Kardashians in many, many ways, right? He legitimized them. He brought them to the forefront of the culture. He basically turned Kim into who she is. And the way that they talk about him, the like, he's like a little crazy, we're keeping him out. Like the way, the way that Britney was talked about, right? Like she can't make her own decisions. She's mentally unstable. Like it's just interesting to see how this narrative that has been applied to Britney really is so prevalent in the world of celebrity. I mean, it specifically gets applied to a lot of Black entertainers. Like I'm thinking also Azealia Banks, right? Like, don't listen to what Azealia Banks has to say because it's 90% bullshit, and the 10% that's true, you found some reason to hate her and not believe her about it anyways, right? Like, it really comes down to a lot of dog whistling, and in his own wrongs, Kanye has done plenty of wrong, but it comes to a weaponization of mental health, and that is essentially the crux of where the corruption of conservatorships and conservatorship abuse stems from. I personally don't think the concept of conservatorship should even exist to begin with. I think there's many other forms of support that we can find for people who genuinely do need it, but that should also come to a point where they are consenting to it. The thing about conservatorships is
once you're in one, getting out of it is literally 99.99999% impossible to dissolve it. It's just a non-thing. And that's because it's set up to be that way. So in Britney's case, that was an anomaly. In Amanda Bynes' case recently, that's a complete fucking anomaly. And so there are points of where Kanye has spoken in what I would consider, in my opinion, relative lucidity. Yeah. Where he talks about being cornered in a room by the family. They're trying to have the doctors diagnose him. They want to lock him away. It's like, we see the same entertainment manager allegedly constructing this for Britney Spears over the tenure of nearly 2 decades.
Yep.
And we're literally hearing directly from this person's mouth, again, taking into consideration all the negative that comes with him too. He's saying, this is my experience, and no one's believing him. Why? Because everyone else in that direct ether is specifically saying, he's crazy, don't listen to him, this is why. And multiple things can be true at the same time. He might not be mentally well. He might not have a great grasp on what is like ethical and like great, or an ethical ideology. That doesn't mean that he should have his human rights stripped away.
Oh my God.
Especially as a black man. Like,
I was just getting chills thinking about it. It's why I felt such kinship with you. Because one thing Britney said in her now iconic testimony is like, I'm doing this also for the people who are not me, right? Like, I'm Britney Spears. It happened to Britney Spears. What do you think is happening to the people who are not Britney Spears, right? Like, correct. That's what scares me so much about how readily I see now, to keep this moving, people wanting Britney almost locked up again because they don't agree with the way that she acts online or the way she doesn't like post the way that they think is right. It's like, do you guys understand how scary it is that they can just literally decide you're not a person anymore?
It takes one doctor and one judge. That's it.
2 people and you have no more rights. They can do whatever they want with you. They don't have to like basically give you anything. They can completely control your daily activity.
And own everything about you.
Yes. Literally, she could not get pregnant. Like, she was not allowed to get pregnant. She was not allowed to take whatever she wanted. She was not allowed to leave the house. She was constantly trailed by security. Like,
couldn't buy Skechers.
Yes.
I always think she couldn't have coffee either. That's like a thing she will always bring up. And the reason why she always brings it up, because it is so fickle. And yet that's how you can keep someone really manipulated and controlled.
And to match you on that too, it's a great point, because even recently in the past 2 weeks, K-Fed has been on this smear campaign because that whole side is realizing that their bag is fumbling now.
Yeah,
because he was also a pillar in upholding the ableist notions that she had to be under control. He was getting his alimony and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So now the smear campaign of where all of a sudden Britney Spears is worried that she has a crystal meth addiction. Why all of a sudden someone who was literally not allowed to drink coffee, someone who has not had access to anything relative to a plug, all of a sudden you think has developed a crystal meth addiction. Like, it's just not sound.
And there's this weird thing happening too with Sam, her husband, that they're starting to kind of paint him as like this co-conspirator, as like, oh, he's going to protect Britney, even though she's off the edge and going crazy. He's not going to say anything because he has this weird loyalty we'll just never understand, as if he's also not a person who can have autonomy.
Right. And that also comes down to, there's like also a lot of deeply rooted just like Islamophobia in general against him too. And it's like, because he's not like the white knight or whatever.
Or that he's younger than her. It's like a weird thing. Yeah.
It's just, and meanwhile, he was the one who was kind of her saving grace amidst everything, because he helped play the game to stay in the ether for as long as he needed to. And I think how that gets lost on people is beyond me, because she clearly is very happy with him. And to even in the case that there was something ulterior going that we weren't privy to, if there was suspicion, it's still her choice. And we can't undermine her choices.
And I always wonder, like, what people actually think, right? Like, our parents, none of our parents are ever going to be on the level of Britney Spears. God, I hope.
No.
Like, if our parents were going through custody battles with me, like, why are you trusting the person that is publicly weaponizing their children against a mother that has survived this, right? Like, let alone their mother at all. Like, do I have zero respect for you at that point? But also a mother who literally escaped indentured servitude for the last plus decade. And you're using her mental health against her. You're turning her children against her in the public. Like,
trying to drive her crazy.
Yes. What about that makes you think, oh, Kevin's the one telling the truth? When Kevin was also collaborating with her father on things like the restraining order against Kevin for the way he was treating her children, which, by the way, Kevin said never happened and like was all shot down and everyone made up except for Brittany, right? Like, I don't know. It freaks me out that people think that because someone is, let's just assume Brittany has some sort of mental health going on, which we all do, by the way. I mean, famously, I have a bipolar diagnosis. Like, I don't think that gives anyone the right to lock me up, strip me of my rights, right? And even if she is on drugs, that's her right. She gets to be on drugs. You don't get to tell her she can't be on drugs. And I'm not saying she is, but it's like part of being free is legitimate freedom.
Autonomy.
Whatever she wants, full autonomy. And the fact that we're even indulging that conversation scares me. What do you think that impulse is for people to like circle back the other direction now? People in the movement even.
I would say, I think it's just, it's a conditioning of how we interpret good and bad and rise and fall, for lack of a better, like, it's not very a concise way to put it, I suppose. But it's like, I think Brittany is just very emblematic of that kind of process of thinking in general, where it's like she was the rising meteor. Then when all the drama in 2007 was going on, then everyone was rooting. I mean, even like look at Amy Winehouse. It was kind of the same notion, Grammy accolade. But then when she was down, everyone was praying she stayed down until she died. And then I was like, oh no, poor her. How'd that happen?
Yeah.
It's the same thing that we're experiencing, you know, in kind of varied parallels with Brittany, where it's like, no one will be satisfied until she's dead. And like, that's really just like the grossest part about it, where it's like, what if the intention really should just be that she's free and happy, and like that should be satisfactory enough. But I think specifically for those within the movement who have kind of done that 180 pivot, going back to, oh my God, something's wrong again, or they think Sam's involved with something and the conservatorship secretly isn't terminated, whatever. It's like, that's because it's your point of identity. Like you've taken and absorbed an entire situation that you were on the periphery of, and you maybe helped push along in a unified sense. But because that was something that was a talking point for any of these individuals in question for however X long that they were involved with it, that's their own soul-centered point of identification. So when that goes away, or when that went away per the termination of conservatorship, then it's kind of like this. Remember in Finding Nemo when the fish finally escaped the fish tank and they're in the plastic bag and it's like, what now?
Yeah.
That is like indicative of what we're dealing with here.
Oh, that is such a good metaphor.
It really is.
I've never heard that metaphor before, but thank you.
Very well. What now?
Okay, so I don't want to end this on like darkness, obviously, because Brittany, for so many of us, is like such a source of positivity and light and like affirmation. I mean, like, she is literally the soundtrack of my life. I think it's like her, Kylie Minogue, and Beyonce are like the pillar of my identity. So I'm gonna play a rapid fire game with you of just like favorite Britney-isms, and just whatever comes to your mind, however long you want to explain it, feel free. Okay. Favorite Britney album?
Circus.
Okay.
Ooh.
Favorite Britney song?
Mannequin.
Okay. Okay. So you could be in any of Britney's current music videos. Which one would you be in? If you could go back and refilm them with her.
Work bitch.
Work bitch. Sick. Okay. You are only allowed to perform one Britney song for the rest of your drag career. Which song?
Trouble.
Oh, I wasn't expecting Trouble. That's actually really sick. Okay.
I love a deep cut.
Love a deep cut. Okay, so then I had one more, but I don't think I even Dream Britney collaborator, like guest star on one of her tracks.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well either Janet or
Yes.
Kylie. Oh. Easy peasy.
Oh, I know, right? Okay, that's actually such a good answer. I was like not even thinking either of those two. Shout out
Janet's her drag mom.
Janet is literally her drag mom. Okay, wait, Matt, I do have to ask you this too. Favorite Britney song? Let's show off for our new friend.
Toy Soldier. Weird one, but
Good.
I love Breakout. I mean, oh my God.
Yeah, I will say, I think my favorite obviously is Overprotected Dark Child remix specifically. Like that's like
Fair.
my song, but
also Me Against the Music. I mean, that one always like
yeah,
gets the engine
hits.
But I think if I had to do a deep cut just so I could really show off for Bible Girl, my favorite other Britney song B-side is Don't Keep Me Waiting, which is Femme Fatale is like one of my favorite albums. Don't Keep Me Waiting is so good. Every time I listen to it,
she got British accent in that too.
She's got a British accent. Femme Fatale is like such an underrated Britney album. Like it's like Britney's hyper pop album is like what I tell everybody about.
Yeah,
that
she's
album. Like,
total
please.
cyborg femme queen on that down.
I'm literally re-listening to that right after this, honestly.
Please go do. Well, Bible Girl, has been such a pleasure to have you. Sorry for keeping you so long, but you are literally
There's no need to apologize.
Yeah, we could go for like 3 more hours, honestly.
Thank you so much.
Is there anything that is in the works for Bible Girl that you want to plug? You know, anything that you want us to go click on, watch, view?
Well, I guess plug wise, nothing product pluggy, but exclusive. I'm moving back to New York City. Deadline October 2024.
Oh
so y'all
God.
heard it here first officially.
She's not an LA diva no more. She's escaping West Hollywood.
To quote Jinx Monsoon, I plugged into the Matrix. Now it's time to unplug a little bit.
Well, welcome back to the East Coast. We'll definitely have to link up the next time. Well, when
Yes,
you're officially
please.
back.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'll be microdosing trips in general, so we'll keep.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you so much for having us. Well, why did you had us, but we had
I'm
you
in y'all's
too.
house.
And happy Pride, everyone. We're going to do our iconic goodbye. Feel free to join in on 3 if you'd
Of
like.
course.
Yeah, please harmonize.
3, 2, 1. Good. You've been listening to Eating for Free, which is written and hosted by myself, Joan Summers, and Matthew Lawson, and produced by Ashlyn Thomas and myself, with music from our friend Pluto. For more information about this episode and our show, go to eatingforfree.com. And if you want weekly bonus episodes, go to patreon.com/eatingforfree, which helps support this show and keep it going. We've also got merch at eatingforfree.com/merch.